I w tej pięknej przestrzeni dzięki panu dyrektorowi, który nam to dosłownie w tydzień udostępnił, więc myślę, że duże brawa dla zarządu, który nie tylko udostępnił nam ten obiekt, ale również zrobił to w formie promocyjnej. Więc myślę, że następnym razem te promocje jeszcze będą większe, a my się będziemy tutaj grzecznie sprawować. Witam jeszcze raz wszystkich już tak oficjalnie i zapraszam nie tylko na wykład, nie tylko na prezentację naszego sponsora, ale na te rzeczy, które się będą działy w najbliższym czasie w stowarzyszeniu, czyli za 2 tygodnie mamy majówkę. Jeśli ktoś na tą majówkę chce dojechać na rowerze, to niech się zgłasza do naszego biura, bo kilka osób już się wybiera tam w ten sposób i będzie to też jedna z form, którą będziemy starali się promować. Na naszej stronie pojawiły się już zachęty do zakupu i podawania swoich rozmiarów, jeśli chodzi o stroje rowerowe. To już niedługo będzie formularz. No i następne rzeczy, które się będą działy w najbliższym czasie, to będzie ogłoszony przegląd architektury, który nazywa się SPAW, czyli to jest Śląski Przegląd Architektury Województwa. Ma nas wszystkich spawać ze sobą, ma pokazywać to, co przez ostatnie 3 lata, bo to będzie za czas 2015-2012 zostało w naszej śląskiej architekturze, a właściwie zrobione przez śląskich architektów, to, co zostało przez nas wyprodukowane. I wszystkie te obiekty, które zostały wyprodukowane wcześniej, postawione wcześniej, ale nie były złożone jako obiekty do SPAW-u, który obejmował czas 2000-2012. Więc to są te najbliższe rzeczy, które będą się w stowarzyszeniu działy. I już niedługo, bo dzisiaj wpłaciliśmy ostatnią ratę i mamy możliwość uruchomienia naszej restauracji, naszego miejsca spotkań. To miejsce będzie się nazywało Klubo-Galeria SARP, ruszy w miarę szybko. To myślę, że na następnym spotkaniu już będziemy mogli dokładnie stwierdzić, w którym momencie się to zacznie. Dziękuję za brawa dla naszego tutaj właściciela tego obszaru i przekazuję głos Paulinie, która opowie o tym, co się dzisiaj będzie działo w Szczególach.
Dziękuję Wam wszystkim za tak liczne przybycie i mam nadzieję, że będziemy się spotykać tutaj właśnie w Międzynarodowym Centrum Kongresowym i w jeszcze liczniejszym gronie. Na pewno czeka nas bardzo fajny wykład, za który pragnę podziękować sponsorom, że pozwolili nam na zorganizowanie tego wykładu. Bardzo serdecznie dziękujemy. Dziękuję również dziewczynom, które bardzo mocno i ciężko pracują na to, żebyśmy mogli się tutaj spotykać w takim gronie. Dziewczynom z SARP-u, dziewczynom z grupy EMA, które robią naprawdę świetną robotę. Not many people of you know, and I guess there's a reason that I studied in Switzerland, and I had the pleasure of seeing the architecture and going to the buildings of our Masters of the Day. And it is an amazing office, amazing work, and the reason I wanted to invite them here to give the lecture, it's somehow because I found it very similar to what I can find here in Silesia. And one of the things they told me yesterday when they arrived here is that it's quite strange because they are always invited to industrial cities. They've been to Chicago, they've been to many cities, industrial cities when there is a coal mining in Germany. They've been to Saint-Antoine in France, and now they are here in Katowice. So they found it extremely interesting that here, again, they found this culture of mining, they find the culture of heavy industry. And so I pose a question. Maybe you will find why the great architects, Master of Architecture, Pia Durisch and Aldo Nolli, have this kind of connection to the industrial cities. I will invite you to the amazing architecture and amazing project. Please give a big round of applause to Pia Durisch and Aldo Nolli.
Good evening to everybody. It is an honor for us to be invited by the Association of Polish Architects to this series of lectures titled Masters of Architecture. It is with pleasure that we will try to share some thoughts on architecture. This lecture will be composed of 6 memos on main topics of architectural design. The first memo is intended as a general introduction to our way to practice architecture, while the 5 following memos consist in 5 built architecture, 5 projects that we consider representative for our work. 5 projects that are distributed in time to constitute a sort of chronological relay. Living Architecture. This is the title of our very first lecture we had the pleasure to hold in an absolute iconic building for modern architecture like Mies van der Rohe's Crown Hall at IIT campus in Chicago. Living Architecture was also the title of a related exhibition of our work at iSpace Chicago in December 2000. It was the first time that we had the opportunity to pause and think about our architecture hic et nunc, which means here and now. And in the here and now of our architectural thinking that we will try to expose as an introduction to this lecture. In our contemporary everyday life, we are constantly faced with plenty of images, inspiration and topics provided by most different disciplines and fields of human life. This multiplicity and complexity of science is very important for our work and life. It is also the reason why we strongly believe in the idea of here and now, hic et nunc, where the particularity of local meets the complexity of global. Quoting Walter Benjamin, it is its presence in time and space, its unique existence at the place where it happens to be, that is fascinating us facing architecture. Since 1993, we try, with our work, to face the fundamental topics of our territory, our society, and our economy. Indeed, the practice of architecture is a fascinating profession. The idea to build something useful for the society, gives a sensation of great satisfaction and is our best achievement. On the other hand, the practice of architecture is becoming more and more complex, and the very role of architect is called into question. With the topic architecture, we don't consider the whole built environment, but only the part of it that we consider architecture. For the last 2 decades, our studio has been involved in several project typologies, from the private house to public and institutional buildings to urban planning, becoming successfully engaged with all dimensions of architectural and urban design. Facing a project, we recognize 2 kinds of thinking that interact between them, making images coming forth. The first is given by the effort to see everything as new, absorbing with our imagination all the impulses that derive us from the place and the pre-existing context, without prejudice, like as we were facing a certain problem for the first time, with the typical enthusiasm of children. The second approach is given by our practice, our professional competence, and the previously acquired experiences, and by the materials accumulated in our memory, experience, evolution, tradition, reference. We always strive for sustainability in our projects. Between 1989 and 1993, we designed with Giancarlo Durisch the Swisscom Service Center in Giubiasco. At that time, the Swiss label for sustainability building, Minergie, didn't exist yet, but we realized the first high-energy efficiency building of southern Switzerland with 6 main projects in the field of ecology and economy. While renovating the Teatro Sociale of Bellinzona, we came across the big theme of historical heritage. We got convinced that the best way to preserve the past has to make those buildings reusable in the contemporary age. As consequence, this sustainable approach to the past has to face the reality of contemporary. With the restoration of the Benedictine monastery of Claro from 1996 to 2007, we achieved an important and intense experience with the forms, the construction technologies, and the materials of our tradition. We learned from our Benedictine clients the importance of always establishing precise and common rules. Thanks to the construction of the new Chiasso Cultural Center with the Max Huber Foundation in 2005, we realized how starting from a small private commission with an enthusiastic personal engagement and approach and suggesting synergies between public institution and privates, thanks to the consensus of the community, it is possible to redesign a town. A particular process that Roman Hollenstein in the main Swiss newspaper Neue Zürcher Zeitung defined as die kulturelle Neuerfindung einer Stadt, which means the cultural reinvention of a city. With this project, we discovered the potential of what we, at that time, we had defined urban activators. The practical experience taught us how to achieve the best from our ideas. To get a good atmosphere, striving for the right expression and balance, we have to be able to control the physical aspects of architecture. In other words, we need to be constructors. Architecture is a system that is strictly related to the site. In this system, the different aspects of the project constitute a complex organism. At the origin of every project, we find the recognition of the uniqueness of the site and of the essential characteristics and properties that determine it. With the topic of site, we can understand, depending upon the situation, a landscape, a city, a urban space, a building, a room, an object, a surface, the context of our intervention. To build means intervening on an existing balance and modify it in an irreversible way. The challenge is to recognize the essence of a place with the purpose to create a new balance, condensing an idea, concentrating it and reducing it to an essence in a way to create a new reality that gives us the sensation to rest in itself, provided with its own naturalness, a natural evidence that is able to reconnect itself to the collective memory. In German we could use the topic Selbstverständlichkeit. Maybe we can say self-comprehensiveness. In our more recent realizations, we were able to make a synthesis of the experiences we earned from former projects. The Vocational Training Center of the Swiss Master Builders Association in Gordola represents the ability to carry out a complicated task with a simple and essential system, a light building. Il faut être léger comme l'oiseau et non comme la plume. One should be light like a bird and not like a feather, says Paul Valéry. This building has this ambition. Our interest for the architecture of the city brought us in recent times to deal repeatedly with the topic of transformation of abandoned urban spaces, often related to the railway infrastructures close to the train stations, like the project for a professional center for fashion design and production close to the Chiasso train station close to the Swiss-Italian border. The confrontation with the idea of reuse that was the main project theme last year with our students at the Mistrzowie Architecture Academy made us consider that everything is reuse and to research on the paradigm of palimpsest. The city of Split is the re-inhabitation of the Roman Emperor Diocletian's palace, an imperial palace that fell into disuse after a time and then became the structure for the new city. In his wonderful book Invisible Cities, Italo Calvino makes Marco Polo declare to Kublai Khan, "Every time I describe a city, I'm saying something about Venice. The Venice Lagoon, an ecosystem that embraces and includes the city, is for Venice that what for other cities is the countryside. The reuse and the rebirth of the abandoned islands of the Venice Lagoon as an urban constellation integrated to his natural context would constitute a new perspective for the future of the city." Our students were invited to work on small territorial fragments which are characteristic to the Venetian lagoon: islands, octagons, fortification, lighthouses and shelters for fishermen, all charged with past histories and function. Each student adopted an abandoned island, analyzing its history and pre-existences in order to describe, like Calvino in Invisible Cities, a new program and a coherent project for his reuse, developing a sensibility that celebrates the fleeting and dynamic relationship between physical structures and program. A center for navigation control of the cruise ships at Sant'Angelo delle Polveri, a new public transportation station linked to a new entertainment hall at Madonna del Monte, an observatory of the wildlife of the Northern Lagoon and of the Roman archaeological excavation site at Motta di San Lorenzo, or a public thermal bath of the Renaissance at the Renaissance Fort of Sant'Andrea, a philharmonic hall over the island of San Giuliano entering the bridge Ponte della Libertà which connects the mainland to Venice. The Venice Museum and Center for Archaeological Studies already scheduled but never achieved on Lazzaretto Vecchio Island. Actually, these examples put in evidence, like the city, but also our memory, is nothing else than a palimpsest, a document that is continuously overwritten. The contents that are no longer necessary are cancelled and substituted with new contents that correspond to the contemporary physical and social requests. The idea of reuse is not only a physical operation, it can also be a way of thinking that can inform the design of new buildings. In our competition entry for the transformation of the Lausanne locomotive workshops, part of the heritage of Swiss Railways, into new museum for modern art of the city, the former space of the factory building is maintained as a public empty space below the museum. A big covered public space, a passage below the museum within the walls of the previous locomotive workshop, could have linked the esplanade of the new cultural center of the city of Lausanne with the train station and with the city. Also, the industrial architecture would have been visible mostly as a fragment composed by the old facade and the soil, the spatial morphology, the hierarchy of the sheds and halls of the workshops would have been still embodied in the core of the modern cultural center. The concept of palimpsest, of superposition of overwriting of the pre-existing, is an important rule for developing and transformation of our cities, our environment, but also of our civilization, our culture, and even of ourselves. A military raiding hall and horse stables can be overwritten as city theater. From the moment in which we begin to design a project, we are faced with a specific physical and social context, and therefore with a pre-existing situation. A situation without pre-existing qualities does not exist, and therefore each intervention represents a transformation of a pre-existing situation, a reuse. We are always strongly interested in urban projects because we strongly believe that working with strong projects which can take the role of urban activators on the architecture of the city can give new identity to our suburbs and remote areas who are growing and evolving very fast, like in this case for the Watteville railway station competition in the suburbs of St. Gall, one of the major Swiss cities. Or in the suburbs of Fribourg, where our winning housing project for persons with reduced mobility becomes a place for socialization for the entire population of this heterogenic suburb, with a lack of places of social and reference and identification. And on the other hand, giving at the same time a better life quality to persons with a physical handicap, promoting an active interaction with the social context of a small suburban community. We strongly believe in the social rule of the architecture of the city. This is the case also for huge peripheral suburb areas of big cities like Zurich, this competition entry for the new Zurich Ice Arena. Aldo Rossi defines the city as an architecture, a concept that is crucial to face in an effective way urban space and its transformation. For Aldo Rossi, making architecture is always about dealing with the architecture of the city. I quote Aldo Rossi, the city is to be understood as an architecture. By architecture I mean not only the visible image of the city and the sum of its different architectures, but architecture as a construction, the construction of the city over time. I use the term architecture in a positive and pragmatic sense, as a creation inseparable from civilized life and the society in which it is manifested. By nature, it is collective. And it is just this architecture of the city that became also a workshop theme for our second year bachelor students at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne. We let the students work on the city of Lugano, it's our city, defining full and empty spaces, structure and space of the architecture of the city. Creating flexible and sustainable modular structures for the urban scale, structures to be placed as constitutive modules of the architecture of the city, defining urban spaces. Creating new ideal images for 5 real critical city areas. This type of work gave birth to new architecture identities, hybrid buildings able to contain any type of public facilities thanks to their structural, typological and urban quality. For example, instead of a 40 million bus platform to be realized in Lugano, with our students we propose, for the same costs, a multifunctional architecture with bus station, retail, university and co-working spaces, a hybrid building able to redesign the entire area, a landmark for the city. The first project we want to show you is our first housing project. The House for Us sculpture was a very particular project of architectural preservation built between 1998 and 2000. The house is located in the historic center, the medieval core of Mendrisio. The building was conceived as a sort of connection building between the old courthouse and an ancient monastery. Due to several alterations and modifications during centuries, the typology of the building before our intervention were very unusual, difficult to be defined. The original historic structure was destroyed over the centuries as a consequence of the inheritance laws in Ticino, while the house was divided in different parts. The house, as we found it, was characterized by an overlay of 2 different structural systems. The outer stone walls from a solid and precise case, characterized by the overlap of different openings of different ages, while the internal original structure was destroyed in the 19th century. The new internal structure was organized on 4 levels instead of the 3 original levels and was not relevant in terms of architecture and heritage. Most of the original medieval openings were shut, while the spaces were small and extremely dark. The demolition of the whole more recent internal structure appeared as the only possible and logical way to proceed. This operation allowed the original medieval structure to be reborn as a new element, and all windows were reopened. The demolition process allowed us to place a new precise concrete structure into the old medieval case. A simple, precise and forceful structure that at the same time defines all spaces of the new house. It is the classical theme of the house inside the house. We created a new balance, a jeu savant, a wise dialogue between old and new, a sequence of light material, spaces, sounds. The new structure, cast in apparent concrete, stiffens also the old medieval walls that become the shell of the new core. The ground floor on the courtyard level, thanks to the demolition of the recent walls, the ancient entrance was restored, becoming the new access to the exhibition space of the artist. All space-defining elements, such as slabs, walls, ceilings, are also structural elements. There is no difference between space-defining elements and structure. They form a monolithic conglomerate cast in concrete. While the ground floor is the level of the courtyard, the first level of the house is the level of the garden. There is a substantial equivalence between structure and space. The form of the structural elements is at each time adapted to local needs and functions. They become kitchen, laundry, fireplace, bathrooms, wardrobes. At the second level, the structure is completed by the only light non-structural element which defines like coffers the 2 bedrooms closed by sliding doors. This is the only exception to a structural system in which structure and space are otherwise completely equivalent. The third level is conceived as a big and high open space reaching until the roof, a multifunctional space that hosts library, private studio and playroom. The section underlines the relationship between the historic medieval shell with his uneven original windows and the new precise concrete structure. The new house is a unitary entity made of two complementary parts, shell and core. The courtyard facade after the renovation with the reopening of the original windows and of the main entrance. The garden facade after demolition of precarious outbuildings and with the original medieval windows restored. The typical material of the ancient medieval facade gives to the garden a particular atmosphere, an archaic expression. This archaic appearance is emphasized at nighttime by the contrast between the medieval facade and the warm contemporary internal spaces. In the courtyard, the old entrance is restored to give access to the sculpture exhibition space of the artist. The artist's bedroom, a small room with a simple natural light regulation system. The whole house is characterized by a very simple but effective standard. The living and dining area on the first floor with direct access to the garden. The apparent concrete structure is clearly visible, in contrast with the plastered medieval shell. The new window frames on the studio level are attached directly to the existing walls with a very simple detail. The relationship between old and new is straight and pragmatic. The openings, indeed, start from the floor level, giving a nice and charming view of the garden below. Materials are taken from the local tradition and are simple and cheap. Concrete for the new structure, steel frames for the glass doors, small white terrazzo tiles on the floor. See. The concrete floor of the ground level is the only exception, while structural cores are completed with maple wood infills. The staircase space that connects the 4 different levels of the house. The process who led to the creation of the cultural center of Chiasso was a very important experience about the refoundation of a place. A process in which we were involved not only with the design of urban space and buildings, the transformation of an abandoned and polluted industrial area in cultural center, a process who takes its origins from the synergy of the right resources at the right time. Chiasso is a small city, or maybe a large town of 8,500 people, located on the very southern border of Switzerland, a few kilometers from the Italian city of Como. Chiasso is the border, a place that would not exist in this place without the border. And it is indeed the presence of the border that confers to Chiasso that particular atmosphere, a unique mix of cultural, social, historic and urban facts. Film director Heinz Büttler defined Chiasso in his film with the same title, The End of Switzerland. Chiasso is the biggest freight train station of Switzerland, and maybe it is this sea of rails that confers to Chiasso the particular character of a harbor city. The legendary graphic designer Max Huber lived in Chiasso. He loved Chiasso. The center of his activities was Milano, where he often worked in partnership with the most interesting creative actors of the time, like Achille Castiglioni or Bruno Munari. Max Huber was the creator of the corporate design of many famous Italian labels, like Borsalino in 1949, or the curator of advertising graphic design for Olivetti in the 50s, a cultural heritage of importance. Max Huber was also engaged in creating the graphic design of different publications on architecture. After Max Huber's death, the widow, Japanese artist Aoi Huber Kono, decided to dedicate an archive and an exhibition space to the memory of her husband. We didn't know each other, but she was impressed by a competition entry of our studio because it handled the themes of transparency and colors. She contacted us with her staff and asked to help in the realization of a small exhibition space. So the economic availability was not enough to buy a ground and build a museum on it. The city authority of Chiasso had restored, with his cultural-oriented local politics, the local theater, providing a high-end cultural program of modern dance, jazz, and theater. Close to the city center, an abandoned industrial area was located between the refurbished city theater and the school district. Abandoned since years, the site was polluted and constituted a serious ecological risk in the immediate surroundings of kindergarten and primary school and their playgrounds. The roofing of the garage, located just beside the entrance of the primary school, was covered by 900 square meters of Eternit panels in advanced state of deterioration, containing asbestos. Many plates were broken with the asbestos fibers showing off. The decision seemed clear to us. The new museum had to be built in front of the theater on the place of the car workshop. At the same time, we noticed that the garage had the potential to be transformed with a very low-cost intervention in a multi-purpose hall, considering that the Eternit roofing had, however, to be substituted and disposed. This purpose, or maybe I should say proposal, got soon the interest of the city authority, and we were charged to work out a master plan for the whole school and culture district defined with the paradigm of Cittadella della Cultura. On a first step, we worked out a master plan for the abandoned industrial area with a proposal to demolish the critical parts of the industrial area, but to keep the garage and to transform it with a minimal refurbishment in a multi-purpose hall. Our merit was to recognize the potential of the pre-existing structures. Despite of the limited economic availability, and with a few elements, it could be possible to create a new public district dedicated to culture. The model study of 2002 shows the proposal. Our small project at the end of Switzerland got some interest also on national level, so that the then president of the Swiss Confederation, Moritz Leuenberger, expressed the desire to see the project, considering it exemplary as a recovery solution of abandoned industrial zones in sensible city areas or suburbs. The garage was transformed in Spazio Officina, which means workshop space, a multi-purpose hall of 800 square meters without own infrastructures and with an industrial finishing standard. The open facade towards the demolished car workshop was closed by containers which provide the services, the kitchen bar and technical room. With simple but effective means, good acoustics are provided to the hall for live music events. The acoustics element define at the same time the storage rooms for chairs and display materials for exhibition. In a similar way to the facade, 4 skylights provide the hall with daylight. The longitudinal section and facade show the new shell of the building. The existing walls are coated with a thermal insulation covered by a dark corrugated zinc sheet. The cross-section shows the conceptual and constructive simplicity of the intervention. The new facade coating enhanced the clearness of the pre-existing building. An other container on the main facade creates the entrance. The Max Museo is made of a simple volume placed on a base which resolves the level difference between the street and the new public squares in front and beside Spazio Officina. Max Museo is a simple structure characterized by a substantial equivalence between structure and space. Visitors access the museum from the street level through a big entry porch and the entrance hall with bookshop and small cafeteria. From here they access the small museum foyer. From here, visitors can access the main level of the museum with a sequence of 3 exhibition spaces, or from the foyer descend at the lower level that hosts the 2-story multipurpose space, the services, wardrobes, and the Max Huber archive. The structure is almost symmetric, but is performed in 2 different ways on the 2 sides of the length section. What we obtain is a spatial complexity starting from an elementary simple structure. The 2 cores at the entry level support the longitudinal walls of the exhibition spaces on the upper floor. Thanks to pre-stressed white cantilever are made possible without structural elements on the 2 ends of the building, the entrance porch at the one end and the 2-story space on the other end. The 3rd core doesn't support any structural parts. It stabilizes the structure and contains the elevator and the building technique. The symmetrical structure is simple, forceful, and clear. Over this finished but raw structure, realized with very inexpensive constructive solutions, yeah, I hope you can see something, where the openings are closed with etched glazing to diffuse the light. The exterior shell, made of profiled industrial U-glass elements which filter and diffuse the light towards the interior, fits perfectly like a glove on the structure. I hope you can see something. Hopla. And now we got all problems together. Because normally it shows perfect is the concept of the facade, but no. Okay. The cross sections show the clear and simple structural concept and the double facade system which filters and diffuses the daylight, providing a good natural luminance of the exhibition spaces. The construction detail of the facade clearly shows the concept of the upper floor facade, where between the exterior shell made of industrial glass and the interior wall of the exhibition rooms, which is only glassed in the very upper part, an interstitial space is generated that diffuses the daylight in an optimal way and can be highlighted at night time to make the museum visible as an important landmark in the cityscape. The 9 by 9 meter cantilever, who generates the low and wide entrance porch, the expression of the wide, full glass volume in the cityscape with the great transparent opening of the cafeteria, that is at one time a showcase of the museum towards the city, and at the other an observatory of the urban context for the visitor. The reflecting shell of the Max Museo with his particular, let's say, ice cube effect, and the matte zinc skin of Spazio Ficina are complementary in their expressions, adapting themselves to the atmosphere of the context. Thanks to the lowering of the squares to the level of the gardens, a safe place is generated, in which all kinds of recreational, cultural and scholastic activities are made possible. The new access porch of the school is a discreet and filigrane filter between school, gardens and cultural center. At night, the museum transforms itself in an elegant luminous body, performing as an important landmark in the cityscape. Mm-hmm. The small entrance hall to the staircase and the exhibition rooms. The staircase with the shifted stairs that provide daylight in the lower floors. The multi-purpose space on the lower level. The exhibition spaces on the upper floor, not yet finished in 2005. All technical installations are integrated in the structure. The same space is finished. And the same spaces in recent times during a Piranesi exhibition in 2012. The interior of the multi-purpose hall Spazio Ficina, thanks to a simple display system, the hall can be used also as exhibition space in synergy with the Max Museo. The standard of the interior is that of an industrial shed, with a simple and fast gas heating system on the ceiling. The first exhibition of Spazio Ficina in 2005. We'll show now three other projects. One project is the Professional Training Center for the Swiss Master Builders Association in Gordola. From 2004, it was a competition, to 2010. In the aerial view of the east side of the Lago Maggiore, we can recognize the delta of the river Maggia, which divides Ascona from Locarno. Maybe you know these places. And on the right side, the affluence of the river Verzasca and the alluvial zone of the Ticino River. In the past centuries, the limit between lake and lakeshore was always very undefined and uncertain. It was a wetland that, with the channeling of the rivers and the hydroelectric management of the water resources, seemed to be under control. In the last decades, the Magadino Valley has developed itself in an extremely heterogeneous landscape. Agriculture, industries, greenhouses, gravel pits, military airport, infrastructures for sport and a natural reserve found place in this territory. Also, the Swiss Association of Master Builders took advantage of these favorable conditions to build in this place their professional training center. For years, the professional center developed itself to the professional vocational training center for all the professions related to construction. But with the recent climatic changes, the Ticino River and the other affluents of Lake Maggiore can suddenly transform the valley in an immense flood. In the years from 2000 to 2003, the laboratories of the vocational center were completely flooded 2 times. The workstation and especially the digitally controlled machines for metal and wood processing were completely underwater. Each flood was causing huge damages for which the assurance companies were no longer willing to pay. To solve the situation, the Society of Master Builders decided to organize a competition for a new building to save the laboratories from the floods. The purpose of the competition was to get a new master plan for the whole professional training center of the master builders. Our project proposed to put some order in the existing ensemble, introducing the concept of a campus of the construction competence. We disposed the new building along the eastern border of the campus, completing the existing settlement to a well-defined shape, and disposed the 3 new laboratories in a unique shed. And with a certain surprise, the master builders discovered that their new project was not built in brick, like usual for them, but was conceived as a light structure made of steel. The new building had to bring the laboratories above the flood level, avoiding an interruption of the continuity of the valley. The plan of the ground floor shows the regular structure of the concrete platform. We decided to raise the level of the platform 80 centimeters higher than the flood level. In that way, the space under the platform can be used as a car parking. The structural grid of the platform is 9 by 12 meters and is based on a multiple of 3 meters. Due to the very low quality of the sandy ground, the structure is founded on very large linear foundation, similar to ski, to avoid an expensive fundament on piles. The whole building is conceived without exception on a module of 3 meters, which corresponds to the ideal module for a workstation bench. The laboratories are conceived as a light steel structure with steel columns every 3 meters, covered by a framework of trusses with a free span of 27 meters, the whole width of the building. Each of the 3 sections was a one-story concrete basement to host the dressing rooms and the infrastructures. The laboratories are conceived as industrial production sheds, which can be divided and equipped following the needs of the users. Each workstation has its own modular skylight, which provides natural, diffuse north light, provided by a sawtooth roof of the shed. A pleasant, diffuse, unitary, regular and shadow-free light permeates the working spaces in an ideal way. Also, the spaces on the upper level above the dressing rooms are covered by the same framework of steel trusses to provide spaces which are completely free of structural elements and can easily be adapted to the needs of the users. To host the theory and drawing classrooms, providing the same shadow-free and natural northern light. The roof plan shows the regular design of the modular sawtooth roofing system, with the only exception of the 2-story parts of the building, characterized by a double module. The section shows how the sawtooth roofing system allows to manage, within the logic of the structural system, every situation, like the 2-story parts of the building. The facade facing the campus shows the 3 independent access stairs and the characteristic pointy sawtooth shape, which is so typical for this big industrial shed. The section shows the absolute regularity of the structure along the module, which, like a continuous band saw, jumps over the concrete basements. The cross-sections show the absolute simplicity of the construction concept. The structural system is simple and precise. It solves in a one fell swoop all the needs of the client about fluid protection, function, flexibility, structure, lightness, natural lighting, ergonomics of the workplace. It is a simple but effective organism. The structure of the roofing, a light framework of trusses, is a sort of tracery that covers the whole professional training center. The image of the new laboratory building on the concrete platform reminds that of a craftsman workpiece crafted in a precise and precious way on his workbench to protect it from the flood. The model for the competition entry shows an architecture which is reduced to its essence. The challenge was for us to maintain the characteristic of this architectural organism in his essence and precision, also with his realization. The real building appears like an ark resting on his supports, ready to resist to the next flood of the Lake Maggiore. The relationship with the landscape is very special. This characteristic is emphasized by the material of the facade, a simple corrugated sheet in polished stainless steel, which makes the expression of the building change adapting to his context, generating always different atmospheres, similar to the surrounding landscape. A quick peek under the concrete platform that supports the shed shows like the building itself is completely detached from the ground, and how with a simple concept it was possible to have a covered parking, saving space for the landscape, a sustainable urban space management. The glossy material of the facades lets the building appear as a precise and pointy object with a shape similar to a sawtooth work piece milled on the bench. I hope you can see it. The interior light is very pleasant and diffuse. The diffusion of the light is provided by translucent multi-wall sheets made of acrylic glass, a very economic industrial product which provides very good light transmission and thermal properties. The absence of shadows creates an optimal light for all the activities of the training center, working on the bench or on digital machines, teaching, drawing. A drawing classroom. Thanks to the diffuse and undirected light and the absence of shadows, the layout of the classrooms is completely free. The perforated corrugated sheets of the industrial roofing system provide suitable room acoustics for teaching. A different layout of a theory classroom. Single punctual windows frame portions of the surrounding landscape, like pictures on the wall. A classroom for computer-aided design with sidelight. The standard white color of the industrial materials contributes to create a serene ambience. The laboratories for professional training demonstrate how a simple modular architectonic concept can not only match all the functional needs, but makes also possible an easygoing integration of all the installations. In the laboratory for the carpenters, the strict relationship between constructive module and workstations is clearly comprehensible. A system of partitions, which is part of the project, separates the workstations from the machines or from the instructors' offices. At the same time, these room dividers work as acoustical absorbers, protect the workstation from the noise of the machines. The last view of the laboratories show the lightness of the steel structure, which spans 27 meters. As said, the integrated installation concept is an integral part of the architectural project and was worked out in close cooperation with the technical engineers and the users. The new ARC, the Professional Training Center, is inserted in precise but sustainable way in the landscape of the Magadino Valley. The challenge was to create a building that could match all the given infrastructural, functional and economic needs of the clients. Rather than result constructive for the architectural project, these constrictions generated a strong project. The result is an architectural system where few precise concepts and a few simple constituting elements repeated in series without exceptions in a serial way constitute a complex organism which is able to carry in an appropriate way all the aspects of a project. And by the way, a careful management of the architectonic and structural resources results in a sustainable management of financial resources, which leads to a clear economic advantage. We lost an image. Strange things happen. Okay, but this building is a low-cost building with the construction costs that are significantly lower compared to all other buildings for professional schools in the Ticino region. Now it works. Yeah. We come now to a project which has been very important for us. It was the first attempt to establish Durisch+Nolli Architects out of Ticino's boundaries, and that happened by winning a Swiss selected competition in Lucerne. The goal of a private foundation was to develop social housing for students with 20% lower location rates compared to the average market price. A joint venture between City of Lucerne, which owned the property of the building site, and the private foundation. A project to host 280 students within the park of the major retirement house of the city of Lucerne. The main issue was to place a 280 students block into a quite residential context without being too much invasive. We designed a modular building based on the size of a single room, referring to the typical one of the existing surrounding houses. In contrast with the precision of the completely modular regularity of the structure, we designed the external pathways as curved and smooth tracks in the form of meanders, in order to create new spaces for social interaction and activities. The building is strictly modular, following a regular square grid without exceptions. Even the staircases and the elevator entrance modules respect the base module given by a student room. They are not exceptions to the structure, they confirm it. In the realized project, the modular structural grid with columns is replaced by concrete walls. The modular structure allows to create different apartment sizes and typologies. Those are organized like a game, a domino, where cores are the only fixed parts. We came out with a series of very dense and flexible plans. The result is a huge diversity of the apartments, a big flexibility in adapting the typologies of the different apartment sizes, following exactly the mix requested by the client, and a high density. Also, the corners of the building are solved without exceptions, following the logic and rules of the structural system. The volume is articulated on different levels to better suit the project site. Thanks to repetition of single elements, the construction was cheap, in line with the parameters of social housing. The rendering for the general contractor's offer shows the common space of a 4-room apartment looking from the kitchen dining area to the living area. A common space in the realized building. These common areas, which include kitchen, dining and living room, are also spaces for distribution. The common spaces are mostly double-oriented, giving better light to the apartment. Furniture is simple and economic. View from a room. The parapets of the windows in the student rooms are held on desktop level to strive for natural light. The facade of the 120 meters building is based on a series of prefabricated elements designed on the module of a single room. It is Minergie certificated, the Swiss label for sustainable architecture. View from the house of elderlies, a mix of old and young people stimulates social interactions. Students can use most of the existing facilities like park, gym and refectory. The relationship with the context shows how the huge volume takes care, thanks to his modularity and conformation of the volume of the existing urban scale. A facade detail. A re-entrant corner where two different high wings of the building are connected. Oh la la. Mm-hmm. Sì. La vedono adesso, sì. Thanks to the ceramic material, the facade is less static and reflects the surrounding. Every staircase has a different color to make the identification easier. The result are nice, intense stair colors which are in contrast to light and warm apartment spaces, relaxing and intimate spaces. Non lo so. Sorry for the problems, but I see the pictures here, but they are not displayed on the... Okay. And then it's bombing. Eravamo qua. Qua. Okay. Yeah. Our latest building, completed by the end of 2013, as general planners and in partnership with Beate Platzes architects, is the Federal Criminal Court of Switzerland in Bellinzona. The project site is a central area of Bellinzona, the capital city of Canton Ticino. Here, numbers of public buildings characterized the area. Viale Stefano Francini, the main road, on which the two buildings are aligned, was designed in the mid-19th century as a new urban project that changed the modern city. It was the first planned extension of the old city and has an important symbolic value that represents the becoming capital of the new Canton Ticino. All public buildings of the new capital were designed along this boulevard. The highlighted buildings are some of the most significant buildings of Bellinzona. Castel Grande and the big fortification wall, the seat of the regional parliament, the seat of the regional government, the regional tribunal, and in red the Teatro Sociale, which we restored in 1997, and the former School of Commerce. The new Criminal Federal Court is built on the site of the old School of Commerce as part of a project that includes the regional tribunal and the public space between the two buildings. At the moment, the Criminal Federal Court is built. The other projects should be realized soon. The concept of the project is very simple. The main volume of the existing building was preserved and restored following the requirements of heritage preservation policies. The side wings and the rear volume of the two-story edifice were replaced by a three-story building to suit the new functions and user demands within the old building volume. The ambitious concept was to create a unique building where the old part merges into the new one, giving birth to a new entity. The new plan reminds to the original typology of a courtyard building, where office spaces are placed along the facade, and the main courtrooms are in the middle. The longitudinal section is characterized by a series of vaulted spaces that increase in dimension to reach the main central room, the tribunal court. The overhead opening gives diffuse light to central spaces, emphasizing the institutional value of the room. I hope you can see it. The working spaces, the offices of the judges and the employees are disposed around the central courtroom and are separated by two lateral covered courtyards that provide natural light to the office corridors. Structurally speaking, the cross-section has a symbolic value where the court, as an independent and impartial institution, is separated from the rest of the building. The concept of our project, preserving the front part of the building and replacing the wings, reminds of John Soane's attitude to the project of the English Parliament in Westminster. The existing part is completed by new elements to a new entity, or better, it is recomposed to a new entity. We maintained the main building of the old school to preserve the urban presence of the building along the street. The boulevard had to be maintained as it was, so we decided to keep the existing facade to value the original idea. In the model you can see the effect of the new 3-story building combined with the main building. The longitudinal section, here you see the competition one, shows the sequence of different vaulted spaces, a crescendo from the entrance porch to the main court hall. The plan of the final project showed the intention of creating a new unique entity. The new building is attached to the existing one to maintain the original typology. And you say it didn't change from the competition. We always say if a project is good in the competition, the realized object will be the same. The ground floor of the executive project. Vedono qualcosa? The floor of the spaces for public access, entrance porch, entrance visitor hall, main court, minor court, and press room. These public spaces are surrounded by the offices of the judges and of the staff of the federal court. First floor. The auditorium and the classrooms of the old trade school were maintained integrally in their substance and take the cafeteria and the chambers of the courts on. The landscaped atriums beside the courts provide natural light to the corridors of the offices. The corridors open like arcades to the atriums. Second floor, around the dome of the great court room, the library of the court is created. We like the idea that the legal knowledge is placed around the courtroom to provide the judges with wise and correct judgments. Longitudinal section, cross-section showing the main court, lateral atrium and office spaces on facade. This is the final project. The main building of the old school, integrally maintained and restored. South facade. Side facade showing the harmonious addition of a 3-story building with the existing 2 levels. The concept of the pyramidal domes was extended to minor lateral spaces placed beside the main court. The result is a series of homologous spaces different in shape and dimension. The structure of the domes is a composite structure composed of 2 elements. A concrete cage realized on site, linked to a series of precast white concrete elements. The Federal Penal Court of Switzerland is conceived as a massive apparent concrete building. The exterior shell and the interior structural elements are all in concrete, in apparent concrete. The idea was to avoid any form of coating, especially for the domes of the court halls. To reach a perfect acoustic of the court halls, a perforation of the domes and disposing acoustic resonators behind that holes was indispensable. It was clear to us that for architectural and aesthetic reasons we needed to provide a relief or a structure of the surface of the domes to ensure a better integration of the holes. We thought about the origins of trials and found that in ancient times, in classical Greece or medieval Europe, trials were handled under a tree, often an oak or a lime. We did some handmade plasticine models and tried to create some vegetal and organic patterns. The main problem was constituted also in this case by the research of the right module, which could permit to cast a repeated relief in a form and to repeat the same module to form an unitary design for the concrete domes. Soon we got clear that a geometric parametrization of these organic forms and the definition of a triangular module was necessary to the realization of the domes with identical elements repeated in series to form a unitary structure. To solve the problem, we charged Gramazio and Kohler from ETH Zurich to develop, based on our plasticine models, a digital model defining the correct parametric relief. The domes were divided in identical triangular modules to integrate the holes and constitute a unitary and continuous ornamental design, almost like a 3D arabesque. From this parametric digital relief, the matrix for the production of the precast elements of the domes were done with a digital 3D cutter. The new spaces are constituted by apparent concrete as one unitary material that emphasizes the substantial equivalence of structure and space. In this sense, the dome is a structural acoustic ceiling. The walls are done in white concrete, and even the floors are cast in place in white terrazzo with Carrara marble aggregates. The acoustic in the court, thanks to the perforated concrete dome, is excellent. The visitors' hall and the main court hall are connected and can be adapted in a flexible way to suit different types of trials. The entrance transept with the old historical walls that are plastered and painted in white. One of the internal atriums that gives natural light to the 3-story office corridor. All these spaces and elements, even the stairs, are internally cast in place in white concrete. The stair in cast concrete, its horizontal surface is polished on site. Non volevo farlo vedere. This was a picture of the library I would like to show you. I try to quit. I make things that you should not do if you do a public conference. And I try to reopen because these images are disappearing while I do the conference. And it's not correct. Ok, eravamo. Biblioteca. Now it's back, the image is back. And so. Okay, the library, still without books. Now it's much more pleasant space with all the books, created around the main dome of the tribunal. The old conference hall transformed into cafeteria with a painting of 1950 of the old. It was the main classroom of the old commercial school. The main facade along the boulevard was completely restored in order to maintain the original aspect. The entrance porch in front of Castel Grande, one of the 3 Bellinzona castles which are UNESCO World Heritage. The connection between old and new apparent concrete structure. Detail of the particular tectonic concept of the facade with shifted floors to get a classical architectural order. To design and build is a teamwork. To obtain a good result, it is necessary to have a good client, to have a good team of passionate assistants who are aware of their role and responsibility, to seek for synergies with other professionals, engineers, technicians, consultants, and in the case of the Federal Court, even of other architects. And of course, it is necessary to have motivated contractors, suppliers, and well-trained craftsmen and workers. Thank you so much for your invitation, for your interest and your attention.
Grazie mille. Thank you very much. Grazie mille per il vostro lavoro, è veramente straordinario. Well, are there any questions? Not really, right? I would like to ask you one thing, because normally there is well, you've been to Katowice, you've been to Bytom. We took the architects to Szombierki, we took them to Nikiszowiec, we took them to the Silesian Museum. And what's your first impression?
You told it in the introduction. No? We are always attracted, and it's an attraction also from these industrial cities for our work. I don't know, because we are always invited in Wuppertal, for example, in Germany, where they invented the aspirin, but then wonderful relations also, cultural activities like Pina Bausch in Wuppertal was the theater and the activity of Pina Bausch, one of the greatest dancers of our center, of our period. And Saint-Étienne in France, where it's coal mining and it's steel, heavy steel industry. Chicago is also linked to the coal mining and the steel in industries. And these realities were made of workers. This workers' city are to us have a very strong attraction, and the efforts that they make in recent times to convert, because you cannot always live from the resources are finishing, or maybe the request is not so high. So the efforts made, and you see in these buildings, and this building I like in particular, of this new series of buildings, and the museum was also very interesting. We saw this afternoon, but also these workers' cities outside Katowice. Also the poorest we saw in where there was the pollution was. You could had a perception of the pollution in the air, but it was so strong. This effort to do architecture, cities, parts of cities for people who are working, and this social role of the architecture, and the simplicity of schemes, and then the utility of the architecture is very important too. So we like the impact with Katowice. We had just one day, but it was very intensive. Tomorrow we will see other things, but it is very positive, because we told to Paulina we will open an office in front of their office. It's an empty house. So
Yes, widzieliśmy pustostany w Bytomiu i tutaj koledzy architekci się zakochali, więc otwierają biuro. Na pewno przydadzą się architekci.
It's interesting. These exchanges are always very interesting. No? And this building, it's very. I think it's one of the first activities here. It's new, no? It's brand new, and there you can feel a big effort of the public to do something for the population here, no? Because you have a philharmony, a new philharmony. You will get a new museum. This hall, this big conference center, and this is important, no? And it's very interesting to deal and to think about projects, because linked by the reduction of the coal mining, for example, or with the pollution, or to solve social problems. It's a challenge that should be a challenge for each architect. No?
Okay, grazie mille. Oh, Pia, would you like to say something? No. Okay. Dziękuję jeszcze raz wam wszystkim za przybycie, przepraszam. Zapraszamy oczywiście na kolejny wykład, który odbędzie się w czerwcu, prawdopodobnie 11 czerwca. Zapraszam serdecznie i dziękuję wam wszystkim za przybycie. Jeszcze raz wielkie brawa.